the ground that breathes death. This story does not begin with a gunshot, nor with marching music, nor with orders from generals. It begins with silence, with that strange, thick, sticky silence that settled over the dawn trenches of the First World War on the land soldiers called alive because it constantly moved from the explosions. In this silence, you can hear everything: how raindrops fall on canvas, how a rat rustles inside a sack, how a branch catches on barbed wire, how someone quietly cries thinking no one can hear them. This silence is the omen of the coming day, a day that, for millions of soldiers, could be their last. The war begins. How man became the earth itself. When the war began in August 1914, the world had no idea what awaited it. Soldiers went to the front smiling. Women waved their handkerchiefs. Newspapers wrote about a short and victorious campaign. Music played at train stations. Children ran beside the columns. But all of this disappeared within months. The Western Front froze in place, like an enormous iron door slamming shut between the world's past and future. The soldiers dug themselves into the earth. They were told it won't take long, but not long lasted 4 years. They dug holes that were meant to be temporary, yet became their homes. These holes turned into trenches, the trenches into defensive lines, the lines into entire underground cities. Every soldier knew. The deeper he buried himself today, the higher his chances of waking up tomorrow. First descent into the trenches, the smells that never leave a man. When a recruit first climbed down into a trench, he was struck by a wall of smells. French soldier Henri Babous wrote, "The smell hit me as if I had walked into a wall. Earth, urine, smoke, rot." I understood. This war is not fought in the sky or immense hearts, it is fought in the ground. A trench smelled like wet clay, sweat, human excrement, blood, rotting sandbags, the sour wool of greatcoats, kerosene, gunpowder, and always death. This smell wasn't an episode, it was the background of their entire life. Rats, the true masters of the trenches, rats were everywhere. They were huge. The size of a cat, they were fat because they fed on bodies no one could retrieve under fire. British soldier William Jones recalled, "We woke up with a rat sitting on our chest, and once I saw about 20 of them tearing at a German corpse like predators. The soldiers could not defeat them. Shooting didn't help, poisoning didn't work. They always returned. Beating them with shovels changed nothing. New ones arrived. Some rats were so bold that they kept jumping to pots of food, chewed through gear straps, stole bread, ran across sleepy soldiers. The men would say, 'We serve in the army, but the rats command the front.' Mud, a slow but merciless enemy. Mud was the main element of trench warfare. After rain, trenches turned into an impassable swamp. Soldiers stood knee-deep in water, rot, liquid earth, a mixture of blood, excrement, and gunpowder. German soldier Otto Dix wrote, "We lived in mud, we ate mud, we slept in mud. Mud was everything. It was even inside us." The constant moisture brought a terrible condition, trench foot. The skin on the feet began to swell, crack, rot, break open with ulcers. Sometimes those simple fellow medics performed amputations without anesthesia under screams and explosions. The first attacks, the deceptive romanticism of war. In the first months of the war, attacks still seem heroic. Soldiers advanced standing tall, rifles on their shoulders, to the beat of drums. This illusion ended the moment machine guns began mowing them down. The Maxim gun fired 500 to 600 rounds per minute. A single crew could stop an entire battalion. After the first mass assaults, the ground between the trenches was carpeted with bodies. Sometimes hundreds lay so close together that they couldn't be removed. No man's land. A landscape sculpted by death soldiers had many names for this place. The belt of death, the land that doesn't forgive. No man's land. No man's land was a wasteland of pits, craters, broken debris, wire, bones, rotting corpses, mud black as coal. Every soldier knew if he stepped there, he might not return. A letter home, written in a trench, a real letter by British soldier Alfred Rawlinson, 1915. Dear Mary, today I thought of home again. There is mud up to our knees. We cannot raise our heads above the trench. Rats run around like it's a marketplace. I don't know when I will return, but know this, your laughter warms me better than any blanket if you hear that I've been killed. Know that I thought of you until the very end. Letters like this were written by everyone. The British, Germans, French, Russians, Austrians, every one of them dreamed only of one thing, to return home. The first winters, when the trench became a home. During the winter of 1914 to 1915, it became clear the war would not end soon. Soldiers began building dugouts, shelters, tunnels, storage spaces, earthen kitchens, improvised living areas, but even these brought little comfort. The dugouts were dark, damp, and cold. Lighting a fire was dangerous. The smell of smoke attracted snipers. Soldiers were afraid to sleep deeply. Most slept for 15 to 20 minutes at a time, and even in sleep, they dreamed of explosions. Alarm before the shelling. The silence that kills bombardments began suddenly, but soldiers eventually learned to recognize the signs. If the rats disappeared, the artillery was already on its way. After the first shell landed, it began. The trembling of the ground, the whistle of shrapnel, blows against the trench walls, screams of the wounded, panic, the deafening roar that made your skull ring. French soldier Luc Rivière wrote, "Shells fell so close that I smelled the hot metal, I thought. If I don't die from the blast, I'll go mad from the fear." Sometimes the trench simply collapsed. Soldiers died buried alive. Fear, a companion that never left. The hardest part wasn't the fighting. The hardest part was the waiting. You sit in the earth, night above you, the enemy ahead. To your left, the corpse of a friend. To your right, a soldier trembling and whispering a prayer. And you don't know whether there will be an attack or not. Every soldier described this fear. German Georg Blumentritt wrote, "We did not fear death, we feared the hour before death." Mourning in the trenches, rituals of survival. Mourning in the trenches did not begin with sunlight. Sunlight rarely reached the bottom, it only brushed the edge of the earth that hid no man's land beyond it. The real mourning was defined by sound, the quiet rustling of greatcoats, the clinking of metal cups, boots squelching in mud. Soldiers didn't rise by command, they rose because they had to. The body stopped tolerating the cold, bones ached, legs throbbed. They woke because the ground beneath them had frozen, or because a rat ran across the chest. The first ritual checking the rifle, even if hands trembled from the cold, even if cartridges were damp, this was law. The weapon must be clean, loaded, and dry, because if the enemy attacked, there would be no time. The second ritual, trying to warm food. Someone lit a tiny alcohol burner. Someone burned a scrap of newspaper. Someone held a tin of stew between their palms. Anything eaten warm was considered a luxury. Breakfast, a symbol of hope and disappointment. A soldier's breakfast wasn't a meal, it was a fight for calories. The British ate canned beef, tea made with dirty water, hard biscuits that broke teeth. The French ate tinned meat, beans, and sometimes a bit of wine. The Germans ate rye bread, sausage, potato soup. The Russians ate barley porridge, millet, black bread. American soldier Wilson Martin, who arrived in 1917, wrote, "We had bread that crumbled and meat that smelled like kerosene. But in the trenches, food wasn't about taste. It was about surviving one more day." Parasites, tiny enemies that could not be defeated, lice were no less dangerous than machine guns. They lived in the folds of greatcoats, in the seams of underwear, in hair, blankets, boots, even boiling clothes didn't help. Lice laid eggs, nits that hatched when warmed, which meant that even near a fire, even after washing, they always returned. French medic Louis Duval wrote, "Lice were like death. We knew that wherever we went, they would follow. Their bites caused itching, inflammation, ulcers. At the front, this meant infection. An infection meant hospital or death. One company could have up to 30 million lice per 100 men. Rats as part of the frontline ecosystem." One of the most chilling accounts was written by German soldier Joseph Roth. "I woke up because a rat was pulling my collar. I punched it. A minute later, it came back and brought two more. They looked at me as if I were prey." Rats weren't afraid of humans. They knew every day brought new bodies. Some soldiers even tried to tame rats, simply not to lose their sanity from loneliness. More often, they killed them with sticks, bayonets, and trenching tools. There were cases when rats ate the faces of the dead, and soldiers feared that if they died at night, the rats would reach them before their comrades. Commanders and soldiers, two different worlds. Trenches divided not only enemies, but the army itself. Officers lived in slightly better conditions. Separate dugouts, tables, documents, sometimes even lamps. Enlisted men lived however they could. Yet many officers respected their soldiers deeply. They knew that without them, the front would collapse. British Colonel Reginald Hart wrote, "I watched my men die, and I realized they were better than me, stronger, braver. I am alive only because they covered me with their bodies." Snipers, the silent death that left only a body. A sniper was a fear you never saw snipers hid. In trees, in ruined houses, in craters, on no man's land, in concealed dugouts. There was one shot, sometimes two. Always fatal, French Sergeant Paul Dubois recalled. "We were afraid to lift our heads more than 3 fingers above the ground. The sniper waited for that all night." A man could be shot while carrying food, while adjusting sandbags, while raising a mug to his lips, while writing a letter. Sniper fire created a constant feeling that someone was watching, day and night. Artillery, the god of war and the greatest killer. 70 to 75% of deaths in the First World War were caused by artillery. Soldiers said, "If artillery decides to kill you, you will not escape." A bombardment began suddenly, lasted for hours, collapsed parapets, tore bodies apart, destroyed dugouts, cut communication lines, filled lungs with dirt. British soldier Robert Gray wrote, "We lay underground like the dead. Every explosion felt like the end of the world." The worst part was when the blast came closer and closer. First 50 meters, then 20, then 5, and then a shell landed right in the trench. Survival was nearly impossible. Gas attacks, a new weapon from hell. On April 22nd, 1915, the German army used chlorine. For the first time, soldiers saw a yellow-green cloud moving toward them along the ground. At first, no one understood what it was. Then panic erupted. Without gas masks, soldiers coughed blood, tore their lungs, suffocated, fell to the ground, clawed at their faces, screamed from the burning in their throats. Canadian soldier Donald Maxwell wrote, "I watched strong, brave men turn into helpless children, calling for their mothers." Later came phosgene, almost odorless, killed in hours. Mustard gas, burned skin, eyes, lungs, left soldiers blind. Even after the war, thousands died from its effects. Sleep that doesn't exist. Soldiers slept little. Sleep was short, anxious, shallow, dangerous. Even if they managed 2 hours, a soldier could be awakened because an explosion blew open the trench. A rat walked across his face. A comrade was hallucinating. Water levels rose. A commander shouted an order. American James Logan wrote, "The trench is a place where you learn to sleep beside death, but death always sleeps deeper." Psychological hell, what diaries never said aloud. Shell shock became one of the symbols of the war, but in reality it was a severe form of PTSD. Symptoms included trembling hands, stuttering, hysterical laughter, complete muteness, panic attacks, hallucinations, night screams, a desperate urge to crawl underground and never come out. German soldier Max Immelmann wrote, "Each new day felt like an attempt to keep my sanity chained. The trench as a microcosm, a tiny universe of suffering and brotherhood. Despite all the horror, soldiers found ways to remain human. They told each other stories, made pencil sketches, sang songs, brewed coffee in tin cans, played cards, shared their last cigarette, wrote letters. Sometimes a tiny object, a letter, a photograph, a piece of chocolate, became a treasure." Frenchman Henri Barbusse wrote, "In the trenches, even a comrade's smile could save you from madness." The attack across no man's land, walking among the dead. If one must choose a moment that best reflects the horror of trench warfare, it is the attack across no man's land. The commander gives the order, a whistle, soldiers rise. And at that moment, no one runs. That is a lie invented by fiction. Real attacks were slow, heavy, agonizing. Why? Because a soldier had to climb over the parapet, fight through wire, avoid drowning in muddy craters, not fall into water-filled pits, not get caught on sandbags or webbing straps. Machine guns were already firing. Every step was a gamble with death. British soldier Arthur Wesley wrote, "We moved forward like men who knew that within a minute any one of us might be gone. We didn't walk for victory. We walked because we could not stay behind." Going forward meant watching comrades fall, feeling bullets whistle past your ear, hearing the screams of the wounded, sensing the ground tremble from artillery, sinking into warm mud mixed with blood and soil. Machine guns, engines designed to erase human life. The Maxim machine gun, used by all sides, was merciless. A single crew could wipe out a battalion in minutes. Bullets tore flesh so fast that bodies fell without a sound. French officer Andre Langlois wrote, "They went down so quickly that I thought they had simply crouched. Then I realized they were all dead. Some soldiers' bodies were bent in half by bursts. Some collapsed without even understanding what had happened. Barbed wire. Few ever made it. Beyond barbed wire became a symbol of death. It was laid in layers stretching 10 to 15 meters deep. To try cutting it meant dying under machine gun fire. To try jumping over it, the same." German soldier Hans Müller recalled, "We found Frenchmen who had hung on the wire for weeks. They looked like rag dolls, but their coats still clung to the metal." Artillery preparation, hurricanes of fire. Before an attack, commanders ordered artillery bombardments. Hours or days of fire meant to destroy enemy positions, but most often the wire remained intact, the bunkers survived, and the earth turned into an ocean of craters. Soldiers walked into a landscape where it was impossible to tell friend from enemy. One Briton wrote, "We advanced across ground that no longer existed. Wounding, pain, fear, and the first minutes of hell. War rarely killed instantly, far more often. A wound marked the beginning of torment. A wounded soldier felt a fiery blow, burning pain, numbness, sudden weakness, a boot filling with blood, dizziness, and worst of all, loneliness. On no man's land, help was rare. Machine guns never stopped." Frenchman Julien Larousse wrote, "I lay on my stomach. The mud was warm. With my blood, I heard someone calling for his mother. Then I heard someone begging to be killed, and all of it around me. The cries of the wounded at night, a sound that haunted for life. At night, no man's land came alive with horror. From both sides came moans, prayers, pleas for help, crying shouts of water. The choking of the dying soldiers often could not help. Going out meant certain death," British Corporal Fred Baker wrote. "The most terrifying thing is not the attack, it is listening to people slowly dying in the darkness and being unable to do anything. Some wounded lay for hours, some for days. Some were buried alive under collapsing earth. Night warfare, battles. Without light, at night everything happened that was impossible during the day. Evacuating the wounded, carrying ammunition, repairing defenses, scouting, eavesdropping, digging tunnels, raiding no man's land, building new trenches. Soldiers moved in total darkness. One wrong step and you fell into a 3-meter crater filled with water, or step on a body." German soldier Fritz Kreutz wrote, "I walked across no man's land and realized I wasn't standing on mud, I was standing on bodies." Frontline medicine, underground operating rooms. Field medical stations were located in basements of ruined houses, in dugouts, in tunnels, sometimes right inside the trenches. They were scenes of pure hell. Surgeons operated under fire, by dim lamplight, among swarms of flies, without sterile tools, without anesthesia, or with the tiniest amount of ether. In one day, a surgeon could amputate 40 to 50 arms or legs, bandage hundreds of wounds, pull shrapnel from dozens of bodies. American doctor George Hill wrote, "I held a dead body in my arms while operating on a living one. We had nowhere to put the dead." Death in the trenches. When it becomes ordinary, death was constant in the trenches, from bullets, from shrapnel, from gas, from infections, from collapse, from cold, from hunger, from lies, from putting a gun to one's own head. Soldiers stopped reacting to corpses. They walked past them every day, slept beside them, ate beside them, sometimes sat leaning against them. Russian soldier Mikhail Gromov wrote, "We ate bread beside the dead." we no longer saw the difference between the living and the dead. The smells of death, invisible but the most terrifying, the smells of the trenches were made of. Rotting bodies, gunpowder smoke, human waste, wet earth sour, damp clothing, sweat, burning fuel, and campfire smoke. They were so overpowering that soldiers sometimes fainted. French writer Henri Barbusse wrote, "In the trenches you do not see death immediately, but you smell it always." A personal story, a French soldier's letter to his mother. This is a real letter by Jean Dupont, written 2 days before his death. Mother, if you are reading this letter, it means I did not return. Do not cry. I have lived half buried in this earth for so long that it has become closer to me than home. If I die, know that I left holding your voice in my heart and around me, live boys just like me. We all want only one thing, for this to end someday. He was killed on May 14th, 1916 near Verdun. The trenches at night. Silence more frightening than fire. Sometimes the night was strangely quiet, but it was the kind of silence that frightened more than bullets. Because the enemy could be preparing an assault. Saboteurs could sneak into the trench. A sniper could be waiting for a silhouette. Artillery could strike at any second, soldiers recalled. Silence was worse than thunder. Thunder meant we were alive. Silence meant everything could end right now. A symbol of horror, fog over no man's land. Fog was another enemy it hit, the opponent, minds, bodies, barbed wire enemy movements. But worst of all, in fog you could not tell where a gas cloud began. Canadian soldiers often mistook fog for chlorine or chlorine for fog. Men who lost themselves, war erased identities. One soldier wrote, "I came here as a man. Now I am a shadow waiting for blast to erase it." The human side of war, light amid absolute darkness. Despite all the horror, soldiers of the First World War never stopped being human. Humanity, small, quiet, stubborn, kept their minds alive where logic said, no one can survive this. In the trenches were born things that seem impossible. Friendship, humor, handmade art, music, philosophy, mutual aid. Every tiny spark of light was priceless. Brotherhood stronger than fear. Soldiers of all nations said the same thing. In the trenches, you do not fight for your country, you fight for the man beside you. This brotherhood wasn't romantic, it was necessary. Without comrades, a soldier could not carry the wounded, drag ammunition boxes, repair the trench, build a dugout, light a fire, chase away rats, or simply remain sane. British soldier Richard Collins wrote, "I no longer knew who I was, but I know I had to stay alive for my friend Thomas. If he dies, I will die too, just slower." In the trenches, everyone became family, a family that war could erase in a single moment. Humor as a survival mechanism, soldiers laughed. Yes, even in hell. A human being will always search for a reason to smile. Humor was crude, dark, strange, sometimes cruel, but always life-saving. British soldiers joked, "We have 3 types of weather: rain, mud, and artillery." The French joked, "If you want to warm up, ask a German to fight closer to you." Germans joked, "There's plenty of water around, but don't drink it. The dead will be offended." Humor protected the psyche more reliably than a steel helmet, music at the front. When a song is louder than death. Many soldiers brought along accordions, guitars, mandolins, harmonicas. Sometimes someone played at night, it was forbidden, but they played anyway. American Daniel Wilson wrote, "When the accordion played in the trench, it felt as if the war disappeared for a second." Entire companies sometimes sang along quietly. in whispers, so that the enemy wouldn't hear. Trench culture, a strange social phenomenon. In many trenches, a culture of their own emerged. Handmade signs, restaurants, nicknamed mud cafes, humorous mini newspaper skits, and little plays decorated dugout walls, rituals, and traditions. The trenches became tiny states, places where men tried to preserve what made them human. The British even created a trench newspaper, the Wipers Times. Written right in the mud under shell fire, it was full of satire, mocking the war, the officers, the weather, even death. One article began, "We are pleased to announce that the rain has stopped, but in connection with this, the Germans have come out, so it won't last long. Letters home, a bridge between two worlds." Letters were the most important thing soldiers possessed. They were hope, therapy, a link to normal life, proof that somewhere a world without mud and death still existed. Every soldier waited for a letter as if waiting for salvation. Frenchman Jacques Leclerc wrote, "When I hold my mother's letter, the trench feels less dark." Some wrote 2 or 3 letters a day, but censorship was strict. They were forbidden to write about. Real losses, real conditions, real fears, real horrors. So many letters were soldiers' fairy tales. "Dear Anna, we're all fine. The weather is pleasant. I am in good spirits. Hope to see you soon." In reality, the soldier was sitting knee-deep in mud, a dead comrade beside him, with shells exploding overhead, letters that never arrived. Many letters came back stamped with "Killed in action." Archives still hold thousands of envelopes addressed to wives, children, mothers, written by hands that no longer exist. One such letter was written by German Adolf Ritter. "My Marianne, if news of my death comes, open the window. I want to leave this world through the light, and if you see a bird, know that it is me coming to say goodbye." Marianne received the letter 3 weeks after he died. Rare moments of joy, laughter that heals. Even in hell, moments of happiness appeared. For example, a crate of chocolate arrived, someone brought fresh bread, a soldier managed to wash his feet. Someone slept for 2 or 3 hours. Letters arrived. A lost cat or puppy wandered into the trench. One British soldier wrote, "A puppy slept on my chest the whole night. For the first time in 2 months, I didn't wake up from screaming." A tiny miracle, but at the front, miracles were worth more than gold. A scene of friendship, a true story. French soldier Louis Bertrand described an episode. "My friend Pierre climbed into my dugout and said, 'I'm scared.' I put my arm around him. We sat like that for a minute. Then he said, 'Thank you, brother.' We didn't speak again. An hour later, a shell killed him." Scenes like this happened hundreds of times, thousands. The Christmas truce of 1914. The day the war stopped. This is one of the most incredible moments in human history. On December 24th, 1914, the Western Front suddenly fell silent. German soldiers lit candles on small Christmas trees and began singing Silent Night. The British heard them and answered with their own song. Then the impossible happened. Soldiers climbed out of their trenches, unarmed, toward the enemy. They exchanged chocolate, cigarettes, spread photographs, schnapps, handshakes. They played football. They held joint burials for the dead. British soldier William Taylor wrote, "That night I realized the German soldier was a man just like me. And it terrified me that tomorrow we would be killing each other again." The commanders were furious, but nothing could erase the fact that for one day soldiers became human again. Trench art, drawings, poems, miniatures. Many soldiers kept journals and drew. The drawings were simple, crude, on scraps of paper made with charcoal or pencil, but they were full of life. Russian soldier Alexei Pulanov drew cats because they reminded him of home. German Otto Dix sketched grim faces of soldiers, images that later became the foundation of his famous paintings, Sleep as a Precious Luxury. If a soldier managed to sleep 3 hours, it was happiness. 4 hours, a luxury 5 hours. A miracle men fell asleep so fast they collapsed, face first into the mud. Sometimes a comrade had to turn them over so they wouldn't drown. Yes, drowning in sleep because your face lay in a bottle of filthy water was a real danger. Washing and hygiene, an almost impossible task soldiers dreamed of. Washing, shaving, taking off dirty clothes, cleaning their bodies, washing away the smell of death. But most of the time, water was filthy. Clean water was for tea. A bath was luxury. Clothes were washed once a month. Underwear was rarely changed. So everyone smelled the same of rot, sweat, mud, smoke, gunpowder, kerosene. Small gifts of fate. Sometimes soldiers found a kitten in a ruined house, a book buried underground, a photograph of an enemy sweetheart, a single surviving flower, a piece of sugar, a tin of tobacco, and these became treasures. Frenchman Marcel René wrote, "The flower I found in the trench was the most beautiful in my life." Moments of silence that let you remember you are human. Sometimes the front fell quiet for a few hours. In those rare moments, soldiers looked at the sky, talked about life, smoked, meditated, took short walks through the trenches, listened to the wind. British soldier Thomas Kendall wrote, "There was a night when not a single shot was fired. I heard the rain tapping on the dugout roof, and for the first time I felt I am still a living man." The final year, when hope became fragile, 1918 began strangely. Armies were exhausted, yet the fighting grew more brutal. Machine guns, gas, artillery, everything was pushed to its limit. Soldiers felt the world had changed. They no longer believed in victorious triumph. They believed only in one thing: the war had to end. French soldier Paul Rousseau wrote, "We kept moving forward because we knew if we didn't, the war would never end." The last offensives, the last lives. In spring 1918, Germany launched its final great offensive. It was an act of desperation. Soldiers on both sides described it as chaos screams, flashes of artillery, constant thunder, ground trembling, endlessly mud that smelled of blood. German soldier Hans Bauer recalled, "We knew this was the end, not the end of the war, our end." Many marched with empty eyes. Men fell by the hundreds, but the lines held. Armistice, November 11, 1918. At 11 a.m., everything stopped officially. Machines went silent, machine guns stopped, shells no longer fell. But the silence was not joyful. French soldier Jean Rocher wrote, "When everything stopped, I realized I missed the sound I hated most, the noise of war. Because war had become a part of the mind's returning home, a world that no longer felt like home. When soldiers returned, they found cities that had continued living, people who couldn't understand their experience, wives who barely recognized them, children afraid of their scars, work that felt meaningless, a world that was too quiet." British soldier Harold Murray wrote, "I returned to my house, but I did not return to myself." Psychological aftermath, broken minds. Thousands suffered from shell shock, the ancestors of modern PTSD, symptoms included nightmares, panic trembling hands, sudden jerks, intrusive memories, bursts of rage, numbness, inability to live near others, fear of silence, fear of loud sounds, detachment. Many couldn't hold a spoon, some couldn't speak. French psychiatrist Charles Pignon wrote, "These are not wounds of the body, these are wounds of the soul, and they do not heal." The Lost Generation, a whole world died in the trenches, author Eric Maria. Remarque called them the Lost Generation. But this was not a metaphor, it was reality. Millions of young men lost their faith, lost their joy, lost their families, lost their purpose, lost the possibility of living as they once had. They passed through hell, and hell became part of their minds. German veteran Ernst Jünger wrote, "We returned from the depths of the earth. We were the dead who learned to walk again." Physical consequences. Wounds that would never heal soldiers returned. Without arms, without legs, without eyes, without jaws, with scarred faces, with chemical burns, with deformed bodies. Surgeons tried to rebuild faces. A new profession appeared, the mask makers. They crafted metal masks to help men live with what remained of them. Frenchman Georges Lamar wrote, "I stepped off the train wearing my mask. Children cried, and I understood I would never return to a normal life." Those who never found themselves after the war. Many veterans drank themselves into oblivion, lost their families, could not find work, lived in poverty, wandered as homeless men died young. Society did not understand them, did not want to understand them. They were a reminder of what humans could do to one another. Memory, the traces of trenches. Across Europe, fragments of trenches still exist across Europe today. In some places, the trench walls are covered in moss. In others, wooden beams remain, rotted by 100 years. But if you step inside them, you can feel the same narrowness, the same darkness, the same dampness that soldiers felt. These are living monuments, trenches as a symbol of the war itself. The trenches became more than a symbol of the First World War. They became a symbol of the senselessness of killing, the fragility of human life, the limits of human endurance, how technology devours people, how war always consumes the young. A trench is not just a line in the ground, it is a wound that will never fully heal. Final philosophical reflection. Why it matters to remember. The First World War was a war of the industrial age, a war in which a human being became a small cog in a vast machine of death. But in the trenches, the deepest truths of humanity were revealed: friendship, courage, compassion, love, self-sacrifice, the will to live, the longing for light. In those cold, dark trenches, soldiers proved that a human being can preserve humanity, even where it seems impossible. French poet and soldier Guillaume Apollinaire said it best. We were human beings, even when the world tried to turn us into mud.